Hello and welcome to the Schooner Pod. I'm your host, Bobby Howard, broadcasting from a potato at Grand Lake, joined by Jameson Maxwell, Ty Lee, as always. And folks, we've kind of wondered how Coach Venables would stick to his, commitment. When you commit, you commit, no visits. How he'd stick to his guns. Well, we kind of got our first example in that with Ashton Cozart decommitting from the Sooners, going to Oregon shortly after a visit to Eugene. Jameson, what happened behind here? Is this a Venables dropped him thing? Is this an NIL poaching thing? What happened?
This is all money. It's all business. But I'm really disappointed I didn't get to see Ashton Cozart play a little bit of a Johnny Gigolo role here. I wanted to see if he could go around and stay committed in his terms with OU, but not have it be honored by Brent Venables and crew, because we kind of saw it, with Gentry Williams. Whenever Brent Venables came on as the coach, Gentry Williams still wasn't, committed. I mean, at the time he was committed, but he was taking other visits. So he was doing a little bit of gigolo work. And Brent Venables didn't say hey, you have to take this commitment away from your 247 account and, publicly decommit. He just didn't take the decommitment. I mean, take his commitment publicly in terms of the class. So it's very interesting to see how quickly Ashton Cozart flipped over to Oregon, how everything really materialized, because there had to be some NIL poaching here.
Yeah, typical corporate consumerist college football out here taking our recruits. Ty, how you feel about it?
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if we can straight up say that this was 100% NIL. I mean, Oregon is known to recruit well. They're Nike's number one favorite boy. They are tremendous facilities. I think a really cool area. Some people would disagree based on their sort of area preferences. It's a good school, and they've just traditionally always recruited well. So who knows? It's easy to blame the boogeyman, the buzzword. And I'm not saying that's what Jameson's doing, but there's definitely a lot more to consider with things. And there's also the possibility that we're seeing a situation where, like we talked about, Venables is enforcing this, once you're committed to OU, not necessarily in this case, but we could see in the future, if we stick with this policy, cases where people will be committed to OU, decommit, and then maybe try to come crawling back. I guess we'll see how that's handled when it occurs. I believe it inevitably will, but I think there's a lot more to the stuff, and OU is bigger than one decommit. So.
Yeah, but here's my thought process on why I really strongly think it's NIL. These kids are constantly getting fielded offers in terms of recruiting. Yes, once you're a commit to Oklahoma, you shut everything down and you're not supposed to, go on any other visits. But absolutely, they're getting constant messages and offers pretty much from other coaches, and who knows if they're still boosters doing that, getting them NIL deals to say hey, I understand that you're fully committed to OU, but if you want to come take a visit at Oregon, this is what we can offer you. And that's probably why it materialized so quickly, because he was talking about after he scheduled this visit to Oregon, and OU fans were kind of freaking out because okay, if that means he's taking a visit, that means he's not a commit to OU anymore. And he was saying this is an extremely unique position to be in as a young man growing up, that I'm going to have to listen to all offers and treat this like a business. And I have nothing against him for that. Oregon probably came up and gave him a better offer. And like he said in his commitment letter, he is from the Northwest. I don't know how much I buy into saying it was a dream for me to always play up here in the Northwest, because he loved OU even during the Lincoln Riley times. He was going to commit that Sunday that Lincoln Riley moved over to become USC's head coach. So I think it's just all about these kids are constantly getting offers, and he finally liked one that he saw enough to where he doesn't really even need to do a visit. He just had to do that because he was about to commit and take this NIL offer.
Yeah,
for sure.
I will say, shout out to Huber in the comments. Let the kids be kids. Not going to post the second one up here, but I love it. My thing is, My thing is Nike. It's not just pure Nike and Oregon. It's not just pure NIL though. I feel like they're a very unique opportunity, similar as like kind of like what Stanford would do, where they're like, you can get a really good degree here, you can get a good education. But what they do is like, from what I've heard, I believe Kayvon Thibodeau talked about this in some of his pre-draft stuff, is that Oregon will provide internship opportunities with Nike. Rosie's getting all upset, my dog over here, about the NIL. But they'll provide internship opportunities as well. So it goes deeper than just throwing them money. It's giving them opportunities. And at the end of the day, you kind of can't hate on them for that, because that is something that can really, really help.
For sure. Yeah. And I think I have, I lost my, so one quick point before I dive into replying to what Bobby just said. Ultimately, you don't want people on your team that aren't fully committed to your program. And you run the risk of, when you're a really good recruiter, of getting people to agree to go on your team that aren't committed. And really one of the most shining examples for OU fans that should come to mind is the Marcus Dupree saga with Barry Switzer. He was highly touted recruit and just never was really clicking with the OU system, and just got recruited through, whatever means we were using for recruiting back then, and ended up showing up, and it just didn't work out. So there is an issue to consider, with guys. Obviously, you always want the biggest name people, but sometimes, or the flashiest, brightest shining stars, but sometimes, the best guy, if he's not committed to your thing, is not great. Briefly to reply to what Bobby said, I agree that the NIL thing is deeper, and things like that, like the Oregon system of saying, hey, we can provide you, or not guarantee, but nudge certain opportunities in your favor, is definitely an important thing and a big factor. And that's something that I think athletes are a lot smarter nowadays in planning for their future, which is ultimately a good thing for absolutely everyone. And I think it is a good thing. And, I hope more people do it. I can't necessarily knock that at all, because guys are starting to wise up nowadays to the fact that even if they do make it to the league, there's only one Tom Brady. Most league careers are not going to last anywhere near, any significant amount of time, really, in terms of using the word career. And even if you reach the pinnacle, you're still going to have to plan for afterwards. So I respect that angle of things, because just throwing money at people is one thing, doesn't necessarily solve the issue. But I am fully on board with the teach a man to fish strategy, if you will.
Well, I mean, yeah, not only that, but like, think about a football career. Like, what would you consider a good NFL career? What, 10 years, I think, average wise?
I would say Tom Brady is the average.
That's very good. I think any contract after your rookie contract is a good career as an NFL.
I think statistically, that's far above average.
So like because a good 6 years, 7 years?
The NFL, you have 11 starters on defense, 11 starters on offense, then you have special teams, position players. And you know how many players get onto a roster? Was it like 53? Is that right? I think that's the number that's in the NFL. So it's pretty significant, to make an NFL roster and keep it up. So if you get a rookie contract and you sign a second contract in the league, that's a very big time thing. It's a lot harder to stay on a team and stay consistent in the NFL than some other professional sports. So yeah, I get that, but it makes me pose like a thought in my head, like, what is the correct way to where we could stop this poaching in terms of recruiting? Because it shouldn't all be about like, okay, you want this dollar amount, then come to my school. Should NIL deals be wait to be negotiated until they've already enrolled at that school? Could you say like, these are parameters of what we could offer, but if there's any like specifics or contracts that are signed, could that be a violation? Would that be like some kind of compromise here? Because to be honest with you, this NIL like deals and contracts and everything, this early in recruitment is pretty tough in terms of trying to get a class together.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, like, it's college football recruiting. It's always been a Wild West situation. to some varying degrees. Obviously, some people cheated more than others, but for me, it's the poaching aspect of like actual players, and we'll get into that a little bit later. I have less of an issue when it becomes a recruiting chip. Obviously, it can get frustrating. You can look at the Texas A&M situation as well, but I think it has to be like a situation that you earn while you're at that school. I fully agree with that, because the fact is having NIL opportunities offered to other players, whether it be in the recruitment stage or in the transfer portal stage, or the most disturbingly in a situation where you're just on a roster and not even in the portal, that's where it gets bad. I'm all for guys earning their opportunities. I'm all for guys getting their opportunities. But when colleges are leveraging it against each other, it just creates a situation like we're going to have a bubble here, like where the whole thing bursts, and that's just too much money.
I agree.
Well.
Yeah, it is a bubble. Another thought I had like about a week ago, and I should have said on the last pod, and Ty, I absolutely want your thought on here because I feel like this would be interesting for you. You know, all this money is getting pulled into this recruiting, and we're really like trying to get, this poaching, and these people are just throwing crazy amounts of money like Texas A&M at recruits. But when's that money going to dry up? When is that money that we're sending to those recruits going to get taken away from those like dues that you would give in general as a booster to the athletic department? Is this overall going to kill some athletic departments who are trying to keep up with recruiting, and they don't have enough money after they've paid their star recruits to entice them to come over?
So I think the key thing that you mentioned there is, the fact that you believe that it's a bubble, and I think it is to some extent, because I don't think there's ever going to be a situation where the money runs out. But with college football's system of the NIL, again, NIL being sponsorships that are not necessarily linked to the school, but then also donor money, there are so many moving parts in that system. It is not the NFL where you have one team, one front office, and maybe one overactive owner in some cases that have their hands in the pot. In the NFL, you get what, like three moving parts at most if you look at owner and then maybe a coach that's not in line with the front office, and you have those three people that are trying to figure out these rosters. I think with college, I constantly use the term that it's this pendulum, and we've just let it go. And it's swinging far to one side, of course. But as these, because, most of these big name college people, a lot of them aren't going to pan out. That's just a matter of fact. We wish the best for all of them, but that's just a fact. And I think at a lot of these schools where you have a lot of donors that are very excited to start to throw money at things, when people start to not pan out and they start to realize that it's not a throw money at and fix it problem, I think the schools are going to see that they're having less opportunity. So I think right now it's way too soon to say. I would argue that it's almost not trying to, placate you specifically, Jameson, but to use medical terms, we've just started this course of treatment, and I don't think it would be right to, after one season or even 3, maybe even 4 seasons, to make a decision on this. I love the sort of openness of it. I think it's a very interesting ecosystem, but we have to let that ecosystem develop. We can't, immediately start chopping at the pendulum. There is some really interesting things, and I'll cut myself short. I'm going kind of long, but I think one of the big things that the NCAA or maybe even the conferences could do to maintain some semblance of this being a college thing is you could maybe tie transfers to actual school windows. So for example, if I'm a student at, OU, for example, and I want to go to a different school, there are enrollment windows and transfer windows that are open to regular course taking students. Maybe we could tie, not necessarily enroll, but you have to actively be taking classes or something. And then that would certainly, cut down the windows that are open for these transfers. And I think that's a logical step to maintain. And well, I know that there are in college as well, but we're seeing a lot. And, I think the recruit thing is a very different discussion than the active player thing, and all sorts of layers to that conversation.
Yeah. And I agree. I think it will autocorrect. And Trap House Boobin on our YouTube comment said free enterprise always autocorrects. I agree. The bubble will happen. But what I worry about and what I've seen concerns about, and, I believe Red Dirt Sport on Twitter was the one saying this. What I'm concerned about is, college football is the anchor of any athletic program, right? So that's where all the money comes from. You could be Kansas. It's still probably mostly college football. The amount of TV money, all of that, it funds it. So what that does is it funds all the other sports. So what's going to have to probably happen at some point is these smaller programs who want to keep up, who don't want to fall into irrelevancy, they're probably going to have to start cutting some Olympic sports. Would you rather, if you're asking Joe Schmo OU fan, would you rather stay competitive or cut the rowing team? I think they would invest in the football team and cut rowing, cut all that, because in some ways, a lot of those other sports are kind of, I don't want to call them philanthropies, but they're not making any money. So at some point, if we really go into a money situation, they might end up cutting that off.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. It really is. And I just think that people are going to continue to try pay more and more right now, like in this bubble, because it's a competition. Right now, say, for example, if we're competing for a recruit with Texas A&M, it's going to be a legitimate bidding war for a guy. And that bidding war is going to, for example, like David Stone, defensive lineman, 5-star guy that we're battling with. If it turns into a bidding war between both of our donors, like what happens? Does Texas A&M overpay for a guy? And that donor that just paid all that money, is he going to continue to pay that same annual fee that he was paying Texas A&M? Does he have that kind of money to blow? That's a big thing moving forward that I really want to see. And there's going to be repercussions. I just don't know if it's going to be macro or micro.
I think a big thing is I think Bobby brought up a very interesting point, because obviously you have, there's a legal discussion to be had there in terms of women's sports specifically and the football teams, just because of the size of football teams. So I think, Bobby, there's so many layers to what you just brought up. I actually have never thought of that before, and it's super, super interesting, because you could even see a situation where football teams are becoming smaller and having less personnel to facilitate the cutting of other sports that have to legally be maintained. I think it's known by anyone that regularly listens to the podcast, and I don't want this to come off as anti-college football, but college football at this point is not university athletics. I mean, it's not so I think OU men's soccer is a good example for anyone familiar with OU. It's a club sport at OU, so it's sort of a cut above IMs. Well, it is a cut above IMs, but it's not a full-on university, level scholarship sport. And I think that's sort of the sweet spot for college sports, because it's still accessible to regular students that maybe want to play and have a background. Obviously, you're not just going to go unless you're a super athlete and walk onto the team, but it's not a pro sport, layered in this sort of disguise and money-making scheme by the universities. So I don't necessarily know if it's a bad thing that more sports become sort of club sports or IM things, because ultimately then you're making sports where you're actually getting to play meaningful games more accessible to the actual students, which is kind of the meaning of college sports originally. Not saying that the athletes aren't, actual students. I guess they are to some extent, but there's a lot more discussions to be had. I think, Bobby, you brought up a very, very interesting point there.
Yeah, and I don't know if the answer is to kind of send some of those smaller sports to the Stone Age in terms of, the organization structure, because if you make them all club sports, then they don't have the same, support money-wise in the NCAA. They can't travel as much. It becomes smaller, more regionalized instead of like this, what it is today. I don't know. We'll see how it pans out, but
maybe that's
kind of a fear.
Yeah, and maybe that's, if you're talking about, really getting down to the bottom, the money line, maybe that is the future, even keeping them at the NCAA level. Does, OU insert, non-revenue sport here necessarily need to be traveling to West Virginia, for example, to play games. That's certainly a debate that, like you said, a lot of athletic departments are going to have to start having soon, even with these astronomical, TV and revenue sharing deals that we're starting to see.
I think eventually the answer is just succession. It's college football is gonna secede from, that's just gonna secede from the NCAA. They're gonna operate at a totally different level. I think that's what we're all trending towards. I really do think that's the case, and that would be the death of college football as we know it. Let's be honest. There's been a veneer about amateurism with college football specifically, but at that point, we've just completely stripped it bare, and we're just honest with it. Which
the exact point. The exact point I was just about to say, Bobby. Because if college football, in terms of money that's being thrown around right now, in terms of NIL and how much they're earning, it's turning away from an amateurism to a professionalism. And that's completely fine. I'm all aboard the professionalism. Let's get these kids paid as much as possible. But when it comes in terms of keeping an amateurism and keeping things fair in a level field between other sports, when we start talking about Title IX and getting into all that, that's where college football can't keep, their professionalism. I can go get what I want because I earned it and I get more eyeballs on me versus, screw the rowing team, for example, like you said. So I just think they're just going to eventually have to move on, and the revenues are going to be different and separate.
The biggest loser in all of this for OU is the art museum, because now the art museum, which is completely funded by OU football, but let me just say this: it's probably not going to be funded by OU football anymore. Those funds will probably go elsewhere.
I did not know that. That is interesting.
Yeah, and that's the thing about OU athletics, or OU football specifically, is it's such a self-sustaining beast. It does not. It pays for itself, and it pays for the art museum. So first thing to go is that weird large griffin lady outside of the art.
No, that is not going to get taken away. No, there's no way. Man. What are we like paying? Are we on lease with the griffin lady with the big honkas? Like that's legitimately like, is it not already bought? What are we going to do? We're going to have to sell it to stay afloat. Like you're going to get a garage sale.
Brent Venables didn't want to sell the large.
Is it fungible, or could we just screenshot it?
Oh no, that's the problem. Is it's too fungible.
All of our Griffin titties gone.
Give Ty the info to their social media accounts already, so he can put up the poll. Would you rather have Griffin Lady with the big honkas or Ashton Cozart on your football team? Let the people decide.
Well, that's something we can't bargain with something we don't have.
Yeah, that's true.
We could have used a little bit of extra money to get Ashton Cozart over, because I guarantee if we would sell that, that whatever sculpture, that we would have plenty of money to get him away from Oregon.
At least sell the dumb thing outside of Gaylord. That statue sucks.
Is that the one? Is that the one that is like the bull on the wagon or whatever?
The bull leading the little schooner. It's so bad. It's so bad.
Yeah, man. If I 100% knew the facts from memory, I'd have a great bit about the artist of that sculpture. I don't recall the facts from memory, so I don't necessarily want to say it, but I do want people to Google the artist of that statue and what they may or may not have done, because I don't necessarily recall the facts involving a firearm and a puppy because they thought it was an art project.
Yeah, no, he shot a dog and then was like, "It's art."
Yeah, so
it's not
hypothetically. Yeah, we didn't say that because legally we don't necessarily know if that was proven or not. But yeah, not a good person. What was I going to say? Oh, the real winners here are the fans that start to realize that when it comes to college football, even down to like the D3 or JUCO level, it's so tainted by money and boosters and bending the rules and everything else. And the real winners are the fans. And I encourage all fans of the Schooner Pod to realize this. The real winners are the fans that realize that there is one bastion of college football left where the players are legitimate students meeting the entry standards, going to classes more or less on their own, and playing the sport out of passion for the sport, and that is Service Academy football. I encourage everyone to pick one of the 3 teams. Coast Guard doesn't count, and cheer for them if you want true amateurism college football. Interestingly enough, for forever, and now still, they're the only players that are allowed to be paid a salary by their school. So technically, they've been the only ones paying players above board for a long time with their exemptions, and now they could do NILs, I guess, but they're all also making a salary, but somehow that keeps them amateur. So
does that mean the U.S. government was technically the first NIL collective?
Yeah, I guess you could make that argument is because of an indentured servitude contract. The U.S. government had an NIL deal since forever.
It's the most traditional thing in college football.
Which, if you dig back, that's the big scandal yet to be unveiled. If you dig back to the olden days when Army and Navy were relevant athletically and winning Heismans and national championships, it's just because they were the only ones allowed to pay players.
Wow. We really broke something here, guys. I know we said 25-minute pod. We're at 26, but I kind of want to mention Jordan Addison to USC. Honestly, probably better than if he went to Texas. Lincoln Riley still doesn't know what an offensive line or a defensive line is, so that's great. Nobody tell him, please. But the way he got recruited there, a little unsavory, kind of exactly the same way that he got Caleb Williams, from how it seems. Jameson, do you think there's a foul play here?
I don't know what the deal is where USC is about to get a guy. Everyone knows he's a strong favorite for him. And then all of a sudden it comes out like another team is a favorite to land him, a la Wisconsin, with Caleb. And it's this whole Texas thing. It makes you think like there's probably some very powerful people with representatives along these kids saying like, hey, I know you really want to go to USC, and they probably have a nice little offer for you that you just got attracted away from Pittsburgh for. But let's keep playing this game. You've got the leverage here. It's came out that you want to go to USC, and if you end up not going there, that's going to look really bad on Lincoln Riley. Let's throw Texas's hat in the ring. They got a lot of money, and I guarantee you they can bid up USC, and that's probably what happened because there are some people coming out saying like that Texas is about to sign Jordan Addison. And that was really surprising, but it just didn't seem right because we had seen so much in the past that USC kind of just, they go after strong after guy and all of a sudden they go quiet and then they land him in the end. I guarantee you Texas was just a negotiating pin between USC and he probably got a couple of extra thousands of whatever dollars for that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was probably just I'm with you. I think it's a negotiating piece. Ty, your thoughts?
I don't know anything about this guy, so not him specifically, but just anyone. I don't necessarily know. I don't necessarily know if a lot of these guys are, at the level where they're making these, strategic decisions of plotting different athletic departments against each other. I think it's, inherently everyone kind of understands that, and there's some of it, but I think it may just be a matter of school A makes its decision, gets the deal all but done, and has no reason to discuss it anymore, and it kind of dies down, and then school B throws a Hail Mary out to try to poach the deal that's already done, and then it ends up being that the deal that was already done is the one that ends up occurring. Obviously there's a lot more dirtiness to it, but I think sometimes I think there's an actual term for sort of a fallacy of overestimating things or discounting the role of chance or just happenstance. But it's super. I wish hopefully at some point in the near future we get some sort of curtain peeled back. Whether it's a guy making his own YouTube page and sort of detailing everything, or some investigative journalism by someone in the fake news media that has the funding to do that journalism. But there's some super interesting things going on behind the curtain for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out and whatnot. So, yeah, I don't know, but like you said earlier, it's a pendulum, and I don't know where it's going to swing next, but we'll see. So, yeah. Well, guys, I think this was a really good conversation on NIL and what happened with Cozart and everything. But I think we're pretty good here. What do you anything else before we go, Jameson?
No, that's really it. Just got to keep watching on recruiting moving forward. Hopefully we can kind of get some more guys in the boat that were big time OU leads. But losing Cozart was a big hurt because he was one of the guys that's been an OU fan for this recruiting class for a long time. So it hurts. It really does. So what once was a very stellar wide receiver class in 2023 is looking a little bit thin, but I'm sure things will end up a little bit better once the season starts. Yeah,
it's all a work in progress for sure. Ty, anything before you go?
Yeah, real quick, it's important to mention the Schooner Pod is 100% pro Nick Saban pod because he's never done anything wrong and never will. And again, he has never done anything wrong. And A&M only gets good recruits because they pay for them. We're 100% anti-A&M pod, which I would like to get out there. I know we have some A&M fans, but unfortunately, we're an anti-A&M pod because Jimbo Fisher is a garbage head coach and just objectively a bad person, I can tell, because he would go after noted stellar, all-around good person Nick Saban.
Okay, well, yeah, no, I'm sure our A&M listeners are going to love that one. That's going to go great. But yeah, no, I'm actually kind of team Nick here, even though we all know he's the beef is just a pot calling the kettle black thing situation. That they're both wrong. So I don't know. Just if you're Jimbo, just admit it. We know what you're doing. It's not against the rules. Like you said, it's not against the rules. You're not cheating. So just be honest about what you're doing. Shut up.
When you get not even accused, because the Saban quote was taken out of context, I believe, if you watch the full interview. But when someone says that you did something and your immediate response is, well, so-and-so probably did something way worse, doesn't necessarily, speak towards your innocence in that case.
What about everyone's favorite counter argument? Gotta love it. So, all right, Jameson, Ty, thank you for coming on today. Always a pleasure. And the listeners, thank you so much for listening, especially with probably what I just realized was some technical issues on my end. I guess I was not using the blue snowball the whole time until like a couple minutes ago. So I was just holding this microphone in my hand like an idiot, not even using it. So we're sorry about that. We try to do our best, but when this thing gets mobile, it gets weird. So, anyways, well, if you liked it, hit us with a 5-star review, I guess. If you didn't, that's okay. And keep listening.
Don't review us.
This thing's going to get interesting. So, all right, let's just close this thing out then. Y'all have a good week. Boomer Sooner. And yeah.